Hello, greetings everybody. My name's Ian Hennell. I'm Operations Director at LDRA, and I'm here to give you an introduction to some of the new facilities that we're adding into LDRA's tools. Jonathan mentioned that we are part of many standards committees. We do a lot of work in the industry to be able to educate ourselves. So ultimately, we can then put that technology and that knowledge into tools to be able to help you to do your jobs more effectively and more efficiently and meet your certification requirements and your test requirements as you do your day-to-day work. And we're always very excited to add new facilities into our tools, and I will go through some of the new capabilities we'll be adding into the next version 10.2.0 and also throughout the rest of this year, 2023. And I'd just like to say, as well as Jonathan mentioned, it's been too long since I've been in South Korea. The last time I was here was 2014. So that was 9 years ago. So it's great to be back here, and thank you very much for everybody being so welcoming, especially the team at Moasoft. So thank you very much to them. So I have quite a few slides, and I personally do talk very quickly. So apologies if I'm a little quick for some of you, but I will try and get through things reasonably clearly. And obviously you've got the slides on the screen as well to read, so hopefully they're quite simple for you. But these are the general topics that I will be mentioning in this presentation. So the first one is a tool called TB Justify that will help you to be able to document any variations from coverage metrics that you might have within the tools. Then we have a facility called TBWCET, which Mr. Hoon mentioned in his presentation, which is concerning itself with the measurement of worst case execution timing. It's a very nice new feature in the tool suite available to you. We also have an enhancement to our product, which some of you may be using, which is TB Extreme. We've enhanced it significantly as TB Extreme Plus, but those people that wish to have extra facilities for things like robustness testing, partition testing, and profile analysis of their unit tests. And as Jonathan mentioned, we also have in our tools more updates for MISRA C and MISRA C++ coming this year. And MISRA C has just gone through a large update. Initially released as AMD4, it has now just been released as MISRA 2023. So if you're writing C code in the safety critical environment, really you should be looking at adopting the latest version of the MISRA C standard. This is the standard which will take us forward for the next 10 years or so. And then finally, we have a new facility called LDRA Vault, which enables us to be able to gather information for certification and help you publish it on internal websites to be able to see what you and your colleagues have been able to achieve as part of your test process that's required for certification. Prior to that, my first topic is just very brief. This is one of my favorite topics that I always talk about when I'm using a platform to talk to customers, is we have a facility in the more recent versions of the tool called TB Build Import, which helps you to set up the analysis when you're using LDRA's tools. So when you're setting up your analysis scope in terms of the source code that you're analyzing, the application that it might build, whether it's a DLL, whether it's a library, whether it's an executable, whether it's going to work in a host environment or in a host target environment, the best way to load the information about that source code into LDRA is through TB Build Import. And we are always adding extra facilities here, and the idea is it automates the ability for you to set up the tools for use in your environment. So please remember this facility, remember this slide. When you go back and you start using LDRA, have a think if you're using it within your environment, because it's very good at enabling you to set up the processes that you need to run. So here's an initial screenshot of the dialog there, TB Build Import. And this one, we're just basically running a build command on a pretty basic cache register example. And the tool will utilize that build command, analyze what's happening as part of the build process, and will then give us all of the data that the tool needs to be able to analyze that code successfully. So if you're using this facility, that's great. We're always enhancing it. If you haven't used this facility before, it's worth checking out. As we move forward now with LDRA, we have the new versions that we've developed, which are version 10. Some of you I know will still be using version 9 of the tool, and it is still being supported by LDRA with new versions. But a lot of our reporting now is generated with the new version 10 in mind. And one of the key features that we're doing with version 10 is producing reports that are directly corresponding to the goals that you have as users. And most of those goals are around certification of your test process, your requirements analysis process, your software development lifecycle process, to be able to adhere to an international standard such as 26262, 61508, DO178. And we are developing reports that are directly concerning those standards. So you can see here in my screenshot that I've got a configuration of the tool where we can generate reports on our projects that we've analyzed directly within formats required for, in this instance, either ISO 26262 or DO178. And again, this is the sorts of facilities that we're adding more and more into the tools so that we get clear and concise reporting to help us to meet the requirements for particular standards. And for those of you that might be more familiar with, in this instance, 26262, you will see that the layout of this is exactly the same as the actual layout of the standard itself. So we create reporting now that is directly related to the goals that you have as our customers. And we have supporting documentation that give you exactly the analysis results that you require. In this instance, we have function coverage and call coverage as required by ISO 26262. And we continue to add these reports into version 10 of the tools for you. One of the challenges that our customers have had over the years is the ability to produce certifiable reports that give an appropriate status of both their test that they've achieved and also the process that they are following. And often in times when you're creating requirement-based tests, you may not achieve 100% code coverage. There may be very good reasons why you're not getting 100% code coverage in some scenarios, such as defensive programming is the classic example. So TB Justify is an additional facility in the tools that enables you to document and justify difference in the code coverage that you might get where it is not adherent to 100%. So in these screenshots, we have an example where we have code coverage here, which is below the 100% that we require. In this instance, we only have 92% for this particular function is breaks applied. And instead of having to go through a debugger to get to 100%, which some customers do, we can go into LDRA and we can utilize TB Justify to document the justifications of why we have not achieved that level of code coverage. And this documentation that we put in will then go into LDRA's reports to help you in that certification process. So here we have put additional code not executed as it is defensive programming. And if I click onto the next slide, you can see that whilst we're not got 100% coverage here for this particular source file, we do have the coverage justification down here. Hopefully you can see it, it's at the bottom. Sorry if it's not in your line of sight, telling us why we've not achieved the level of coverage that maybe we should be adhering to. Really good, simple documentation. You also have the choice with TB Justify to be able to have the tool to change the coverage to document it as being covered for you. So if you choose in your process to be able to document your code and document defensive programming as having been covered, then the tool can take you through that process as well. So you'll notice in this instance, this particular function here, we have documented why it wasn't covered in our normal high-level tests, but we can also change the code coverage with that documentation to give us the statistics that are required. means that we don't have to then go through a debugging process to be able to get the coverage measurements that we want to through a false process. So very useful. And if we look at the reports again, we have the coverage justification, and we can also, for this particular function, have 100% code coverage. You'll notice that the coverage for the file has gone up from 89% coverage to 90%. The file is still, the whole translation unit is still not 100% yet. We still have some testing to do. So that's TB Justify that helps us to achieve our coverage goals, documents any deviations from that, and enables us to decide how we wish to deal with those deviations as part of our process. Okay. Then we have this other additional capability in the tool that Mr. Hoon mentioned briefly in his talk. WCET is worst case execution timing. And LDRA's tools enable us to do this as helping us to adhere to CAST 32A, which is a requirement for multi-core processors in the avionics field. It is also something that's becoming more and more important for other safety critical areas, such as automotive, industrial controls as well. CAST 32 sets a set of objectives, which LDRA, of course, can help you track in the TB Manager tool. And here we have this screenshots from TB Manager, and we can take those and generate WCET tests within our test harness framework. And these tests can be run at either a unit level or a module level or a subsystem level or a higher level if we choose to do so. And when we run those tests, we can capture the execution time that has been undertaken on a target environment. So we can see how our code will be able to be functioning and within the time that it's functioning on the target environment. And here we can document the curve of whether our code has been exercised within the appropriate time or not, and within our possible execution times as well, that we can specify as users in a pass-fail criterion. And then we can rerun our tests, and we can stress the chip, the cache, the different facilities that we have on our devices in a multi-core environment, and be able to exercise those tests again and see whether our code is still able to run in the time slice that's required. And in this instance, of course, you can see, unfortunately, in this instance, we have a fail. We are documenting the time that the tests take, and where the majority of our tests are acceptable in terms of the time that they are running, but some of our tests exceed our appropriate execution time. So we now know when we stress our multi-core processor, or stress our cache, or stress our access routines, then we are unfortunately not running our own systems within the right level of time. And the tool will document this for us. It will enable us to visualize it. It will enable us to regress it when we change our code to be able to make it run more efficiently within our multi-core processing environment. Very key now to be able to make sure that we are driving our processes forward so that we can take and use in our target environment, in our deliverable that goes to our end users, we can use multi-core processors and use them safely and ensure that we are not getting clashes on the systems that will cause either safe or secure issues. So WCT is a new facility that LDRA has offered because it's something that we know you guys have a challenge with, and it's something that's becoming more and more important to have run within your software development lifecycle.